The Hero's Journey, a Mindful Accord podcast, with your host, Rich Decker.
In this episode, our guest is Crystal Gaskin. Crystal is a budding entrepreneur with businesses in web development and fitness. Crystal brings a diverse background of technical, creative, and marketing skills to the table to help your business increase its bottom line. You can learn more about the services she offers for online businesses at crystalgaskin.com. In 2016, Crystal became a certified fitness trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine, with the goal to empower women to heal themselves from the inside out with proper nutrition and exercise. You can visit her personal training site at bodyofgratitude.com. Now, the interesting thing about Crystal and her journey is that although she is a personal trainer, bodybuilder, Spartan race runner, she at one time had a life-threatening eating disorder. This is the hero's journey of Crystal Gaskin. Well, thank you, Crystal. Thank you for joining us on the show today. I'm very excited to hear about your journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So the first question I ask everybody is, tell me about your childhood and what were some of the principles that your parents instilled in you, for better or worse? And what are you still carrying with you today, for better or worse?
Okay. A very loaded question, but I'm going to do my best. So what do I remember from my childhood? Was that the first one?
Or just tell us about Crystal as a growing up. What was
Okay.
Crystal's life as growing up? Did you remember?
Oh, so good for you. I spent a lot of time revisiting my past. And so a lot of these thoughts are very fresh in my mind. I'm always looking to see connections, to see how I'm still the same and how I'm still different. So one thing that stands out the most from when I was younger is I spent a lot of time outdoors. I spent a lot of time riding my bicycle, rollerblading. There was this sort of ditch out by our house. It was like a deserty ditch area, and I could ride my bike down there. I could also go there and dig and try to find treasures because that was really cool. There was all kinds of things that I would just get lost for hours in this desert. And in the summertime, I would spend all day outside from the time I woke up in the morning all the way until the sun was about to come down or had came down. My mom, I just knew once it became dusk that I needed to start making my way back home so that I didn't get scolded for being out too late. But I just loved being outside. In my head, I had all of these stories and adventures, and I would play them out in the desert. And I was always cognizant of the new people who would move into the neighborhood. And I was always just hoping that they had a young kid that I could play with, like a young girl or a young boy or whatever. And when I saw them, I would go ride my bike around and, try to make myself familiar and ask them to play with me. And I always loved meeting new people or, kids my age and stuff in the neighborhood. And we had lived in that neighborhood. It was the neighborhood I grew up in. And so you would see other people come and go, but I always felt like it was my neighborhood, like my street, I was the mainstay. So whenever there were new kids, I wanted to welcome them and sort of bring them into my world. That's the thing that sticks out most in terms of my childhood. I was the younger sister, but also elder sister. So I had a younger brother. He was born when I was 7. And him and my sister were probably closer than I was to either of them. I did have siblings, but I still lived in my own space, in my own world, so to speak. In terms of principles that my parents instilled in me, I appreciate both of them because they, for the most part, weren't overbearing with what they wanted us to know. They just led by example. My dad was a very, very hard worker. One of my favorite memories, and I've probably told this to all of my friends because it had such a lasting impact on me. But every morning when he would wake up, he did the paper route, but he also worked as a mailman. But so he would wake up for the paper route around maybe 5. And I would hear, my room was near his, so I would hear when he would wake up. I would hear when he got in the shower. I would hear when he was brushing his teeth. I knew his routine just by the sounds. And I knew when he got to spraying is that an aerosol can deodorant, that he was almost done. And so when I heard that spray, I would get out of bed, I would go down to the stairs, and I would wait for him. So I would be in his like pathway. He would have to pass me to say good morning. And then he would always give me a kiss on my forehead as he was leaving for the day. So it was one of my favorite things to do every single morning. When I would wake up when he woke up, and sort of, I don't know, it made my day to be able to like say good morning to him. And then I think maybe it made his day too, to have that greeting and someone waiting there, when he left for work, but then also I was there when he came home from work too.
So where are you from? Where were you born?
I was born in Tucson.
Oh, Tucson. So you're a local native Arizonian.
Yes, I am.
Very rare breed.
Yes, they say that, but I obviously know a lot of locals. But
you grew up here.
Yeah, I grew up here. So, and almost in a weird way, it's the same thing as my street. I see a lot of people come and go, but I'm, the native who's always here and gets to enjoy welcoming people. So
you mentioned that you like to look back and compare where you are with where you were. So what principles are you still carrying with you, for better or worse?
The principle of isolation. And that is definitely a for better or for worse. For better, because that's where my creativity comes. That's where I get to run wild with my imagination, and I get to disconnect from reality and just explore so many layers and depths of my own mind. But also that keeps me isolated from humans and away from a community, and a sense of that word tribe is really popular these days. And in a lot of ways, that's my personal next level of self-actualization, is learning to be a part of a community and part of a tribe, and leaning on people, because I have survived from my perspective by being that outsider, by isolating myself, because I can do deep work. I just am better from my personal perspective. I'm better when I'm alone, but I know that that's not realistic, especially considering we are humans and we're supposed to be in a community. And being in a community is one thing that I struggle with. A lot of those values changed after my dad died. I think I became a lot more introverted. We also moved to a new city at that time. That's when we first moved to Phoenix. And I think I internalized that stuff a lot. I started to feel like I didn't fit in, that people didn't want me around. Now I was different because I didn't have a dad anymore, and everybody else had a dad, and people would talk about their dads. And I started to exclude myself because I felt like I didn't fit in, and almost distancing myself. So it was hard for people to even try to be my friend if they had wanted to be.
How old were you when your father passed?
I was 13.
And how did your father pass?
He died at age 40 of, I'm not sure the medical term, but he had a blood clot that was in his leg, and it traveled to his lungs and caused him to stop breathing. So I saw him on Sunday, and he died on Monday, which was Valentine's Day, 2000.
Wow. That's must have been very heavy for a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah. My parents had been a year divorced at that point. We had just moved to Phoenix 2 months before he passed. He was still living in Tucson, and we were living in Phoenix, so we would go down there on the weekends. Obviously, I would look forward to that all week, and then came back. My parents would meet in Casa Grande to switch us off, and then the next morning the next evening, we found out that he had passed that morning.
When you were a kid, many of us had this idea, I want to be a fireman or whatever. I want to be a rock star. What did you want to be when you were a kid? And what did you see for yourself when you were a teenager?
When I was 4 years old, my mom gave me a birthday cake, and it was a Minnie Mouse birthday cake because I really loved Minnie Mouse. And on it, it had this little figurine of Minnie Mouse holding a chalkboard, kind of posed as a school teacher. From that point forward, I wanted to be a school teacher. And it never changed until I was probably 17 or 18.
And then what happened?
I think that's when I maybe started to rebel a little bit, and I wanted to start trying things my way. I became really interested in the alternative culture. I had an interest in piercings and things like that, and I just didn't want to be a school teacher with that image. In my mind, I felt that I couldn't. And so I felt like I needed to find an alternative because I wanted to explore that part of me without feeling like, oh, how am I going to be in front of these kids with, piercings coming out of my nose and things like that. So I also I've always had a creative side.
When you started to rebel, which teenagers rebel, but I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. Usually a lot of kids that are raised in a strict religious background rebel rather early. I did. Did you feel like you were rebelling against your parents, or you were rebelling against your father because he left you? Or
in the weirdest way, you mentioned that a lot of people go through it when they're younger. I think what held me back from going through it younger was because I wasn't awake. I was very much depressed after my dad passed, and I think it took me from age 13 to age 17 to start to process that. And so when I was around 17, I vividly remember becoming awake and becoming aware of my life and the choices that I had and the control that I could have if I took it. And that was probably why that was the moment when I started to act on that and started to push the boundaries a little bit more than how I was brought up. The good thing about my mom is she does a lot of personal growth. So even though when we were younger, she was very much, don't watch this, don't do that, she then became more lax and wasn't as strict. And I think a lot of it just happens when people get older too. She had my older sister, me, and then my younger brother's 7 years age difference between between him and I. And when she had to parent him versus parenting my older sister, she was much more lax with him than with my sister. And so I kind of got it in between of that where, she cared about some things, but not everything. And I think that allowed me to have the freedom. And I'm somebody who, I could tell you a really funny story about lying, but it's hard for me to lie to my mom. I'm always very transparent and very open. I feel like she can see right through me. So I just don't even spend time lying. So I would come home with a new piercing and be like, hey mom, look what I just did. And so it was very much me just like testing the boundaries and doing things that my sister would do and seeing how that worked for me and just sort of seeing what fit. Trying to find my identity very much so. I can see that now that I was trying to find my identity by the different things that I did. I went vegetarian around the same time. I was probably 15 when I went vegetarian. And it was just me trying to find my unique identity amongst my family. As I don't think it's necessarily because I was a middle child, but maybe it is. I didn't feel like I had a voice or a place. And it goes back to even school, fitting in. So I think there's been a lot of struggle in my life in that. And I think that's a common struggle of a lot of people just wanting to fit in and be recognized. And I think it's Tony Robbins who talks about the human needs. And my need is definitely a need for significance. I need to feel significant in whatever's going on. And in my family life, I think I wasn't feeling that way. And that's what caused the rebellion.
Gave you a little bit of attention. Perhaps.
Yeah. And my sister is very boisterous. She's very much needing to be in the limelight at all times. And even if I had something to say, she's got something to say better. And that's just how we've grown up and how I've always retreated because it was why try to say anything? Why try to stand out? She's going to one at me. So let me just let her have the limelight and let her be happy.
I'm going to mention this now while I'm thinking about it. Have you ever looked into the Enneagram? You ever studied the Enneagram at all?
No.
It's something you might want to look into. What the Enneagram is a very ancient system. No one really knows where it originated from. but it's a system that says that all people fit into 9 different personality categories. Again, it's ancient. Nobody knows how. It's been updated a little bit. There's a couple of gentlemen, and the name escapes me, that kind of took this on. It's kind of like an underground thing that not a lot of people know about, but it's interesting because when you find what type you are, it's like reading your own autobiography.
Wow.
It's pretty wild. And it might give you some insight into things because, you mentioned that you were the middle child, and, we all play these roles. I mean, there's this, they teach you in psychology that if you looked at a certain number of children in a family, a lot of times the kids fit these roles. I mean, it happens over and over again. So it's very interesting. So when you were rebelling and then you decided, trying to figure out what you wanted to do, what you wanted to be, what got you into computers and how did you get into that?
So that didn't happen in the quote unquote rebellious phase of mine. That happened much earlier. That was when I was 12, and like most families back then, we just had one family computer. So we had to split time. And that was, when AOL was really big. And
slow.
And so, yeah. And I can't pinpoint the moment, but I became a part of this community of kids my age, peers across the world, really. And we would make these websites, and it was on a kind of domain called X Pages. And you could only do a minimal amount of customization and a minimal amount of coding, but that's where I first got my start. So you would make these nonsense websites just about yourself, the early days of a blog when it was called a weblog. And that was where I got my start. So I would do that just on my own, just kind of figuring things out. My mom took me to the library a lot to check out books. That was my favorite thing. I have a hard time telling people nowadays how to get into coding when people are like, oh, you do web development. How can I get started? And for me, I got started by checking out books at the library and handwriting my favorite code snippets. Now there are online schools that will take you through the process from beginning to end, which would be really great at that time. But when I learned, it was just out of necessity. I want to make this thing. How do I do it? So look it up in a book, find the right code, and manipulate it from there.
Would you recommend that someone do what you did to physically write it?
In my personal opinion, yes. I think it's like learning a language. The more you can understand the fundamentals of a language, the better you'll be able to construct sentences later on, because you'll know what the basis of creating that sentence structure is, and you'll know the root words, you'll know how to conjugate verbs, and you will really know the language. I also take a lot of value in handwriting things. I really love handwriting, and I think it helps connect your brain to what you're trying to learn. So for those reasons alone, I would recommend it. But also, as a web developer, you're a problem solver. Every single day I'm having to solve a problem. You get presented with a project, I would say somewhere between 75 and 80%, you already know what to do and you already know how to do it. And it's more execution. But then there's that small part where the client wants something that you've never done before, and you have to then figure it out. So if you don't know how to figure things out, you will be lost because you won't have any quote unquote tools or skills to figure that problem out. And that's where the development of what we call copy and paste coders comes. Is when you hire somebody, you don't know their level of problem solving. Yes, they can make a beautiful website, but can they really dissect and understand what they just put together? Or did they just copy a snippet from something they found because they Googled how to create XYZ and that's what they just put together?
Well, how would you let your clients know that you can be a problem solver?
I don't think the client cares as much. I think it's more of a pride thing.
You just want it to work.
Yeah, the client is, can I place orders? Can people book me? Whatever the functionality of the website, does it work? Does it look good? Does it function? Yeah. Can I look at it on my iPhone? Can I look at it on the desktop computer? The person looking at the website, the user and the client don't care how it's put together, which is why people can be copy and paste coders, because the ingenuity of it isn't important to the client or the end user. It's important when you are working on a team of developers and another developer has to come in behind you and add on to a project. Then it becomes very important. It becomes important when the scalability of the site changes and things need to expand. If it's not built right, you're building on a shaky foundation. So the site is just progressively getting worse and worse, which means longer load times, which then does become a problem for the client and the end user because you're sitting waiting for a site to load because the code is so confusing that the browser is having a hard time to interpret it fast enough for you to get your page instantly. So it's only a problem as it becomes compounded.
Well, I'm in the group that I just want it to work. I just want to hit the button and I want it to work. And many times with all this technology, you hit the button and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I understand it's a very complex system.
It's really funny to me when sometimes I use apps purposely to find the flaws in it. Because it sounds so bad to say, but I'm just sometimes amazed on how things get released and they have so many bugs. Or you'll go to a website and I can't click the X button, to close a module. Those email pop-ups that subscribe to my newsletter, those bug the crap out of me when they don't work correctly.
Or when they come up at all.
Yeah, when they come up at all, yes. But when you can't close it and you can't get around it, that's even worse when you can't complete your checkout process. And so sometimes I'll just naturally inspect the code and I know how to move that module out of the way so that I can at least complete my checkout or whatever it is I'm trying to do to get around it. But from my perspective, I'm like, how did this go through the QA process and not get caught? How does this company not have multiple eyes on a project? Because where I work, we have QA, a process quality assurance. So people test the website. We test it in different browsers. We test it at different resolutions. So something, obviously something's going to slip through the cracks, but we do our best to not let that happen. So it's always funny to me when I see it out in the wild, so to speak.
I wish more companies would do that, especially as we move more and more into this living our life through our phones and tablets and artificial intelligence and driverless cars. With all the problems, I imagine the driverless car things is going to be a mess when they first start. It's going to be.
There's no way it can't be a mess.
Yeah. There's going to be accidents everywhere, and then they're going to have driverless police showing up that can't get there.
Oh my goodness! I didn't even know. I just heard this recently. How Uber has their driverless cars. San Francisco wanted nothing to do with it, which is why now Arizona is supporting it and being the quote unquote testers of it all.
I just saw one the other day. I just saw one the other day. It had a little thing on top of the roof. I don't know what the hell it was, but
kind of warning you.
No, it was just, I don't know what it was. Looks like they were measuring something or something, but it was marked and it was a driverless car. It seemed to be doing okay. I don't know if there was driverless that time, but it seemed to be okay.
So is it programmed to react to the abnormalities and children running across the street or things like that?
I sure hope so. We're in for, it's going to be a very interesting world. Now, was physical activity, physical fitness, was that an important part for you when you were a child?
Not so much as when I was a child. I was very much interested in sports just because my dad was. And he had a subscription for me for Sports Illustrated. So I used to read about sports a lot. And I would always I had a huge crush on Shaquille O'Neal, which is so embarrassing to admit, but I always thought when I was 16, him and I were going to get married because I thought when you were 16, that's when you could do everything. And I was like, that'll be perfect. I'll be 16, he'll be 32, and that's just how it's going to be. So I was always, about and around the sports culture and, hanging posters on my wall and that kind of thing. And I was really into basketball. I was not good at basketball, but I loved wearing my sports jersey to school, even on non-game days. My sister still makes fun of me for that. But I always wanted to be an athlete. I admired athletes and wanted to be an athlete. My dad played softball and basketball, and I would always go to his games with him too, just kind of work
So you didn't
leagues.
do sports in school?
I did YMCA basketball when I was 9, probably 8 or 9. And then when I was 7, 8, my mom had my sister and I in dance. I did ballet dance. Other than that, I did not do sports because the other opportunity would be when you're in middle school. And that was when my dad passed, and that's when we moved. And I did not get into it because for my family at that time, my mom was now a newly single mom. There wasn't time for her to bust me around to extracurricular activities and such. And I didn't want to be a burden on her by taking that on. So I didn't. And I didn't have the confidence, to be quite honest. I mean, it wasn't like I was a YMCA rock star in basketball. I was the girl going the wrong way on the court. So I did try out for basketball, I think in 8th grade, but I didn't make it. And I
thought everybody made it in 8th grade.
Nope.
Really? That's interesting.
Definitely did not make it. And I did try out, or I didn't try out for cheer. Cheer was different. Cheer, everybody made it. So I was the cheer captain.
Oh, you were the cheerleader.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, my sister is a cheerleader too. And I think I wanted to be like her. I always have wanted to be like her. A lot of my life decisions have been to model after her, but cheer was one of those as well.
How about now?
Now, not so much. I think now I'm growing into my own and growing into who I want to be. Her and I are different in that respect.
You're pretty young, right? You're 30?
30, yes.
30. So you've lived a lot in 30 years. You lived more than I did in 30 years. But things weren't working for you. I know you had some eating issues.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So the eating issues probably started around age 15. 15 was, I don't know what caused it. I would assume a lot of the just not fitting in and not being happy with how I looked in pictures. I forgot to mention I did play softball, because when I just thought about how I looked back to a softball picture and I remember how big I felt compared to my peers. So I think, when you don't fit in, you're trying to figure out why you don't fit in. And maybe I thought it was because of the way I looked and, my weight. And so I started to diet and look online for how to diet and how to lose weight. And I started losing weight pretty rapidly. I just changed the way I ate. My mom was really flexible with the way that we did grocery shopping. We could just buy whatever we wanted. So I just started making better options for myself. So buying better options for lunch and bringing my lunch and not eating the things at the cafeteria, etc. I also was eventually able to get a membership at her gym. So I would go to the gym with her in the morning, or I would take, there was this bus over where I lived called the Alex bus. And it was just like a local commuter type bus. And I would take that after school to the gym. So I got really into being fit and losing weight. And then I just took it to the next level. And, if I eat this many calories, I lose this much weight. What if I drop that amount down? What if I drop that amount down more? What if I drop that? So I just became obsessed with wanting to lose weight quickly, and to the point where I just decided not to eat. You lose a lot of weight when you don't eat. Sometimes
unhealthily, yes.
Yes, unhealthily, yes. But when you're young and nobody's giving you any guidance, you don't know any better. You probably, I honestly don't know if I knew what I was doing was wrong. But now that I think about it, I used to check out books at the library that were about people with eating disorders. And that probably was when I started to realize I might have a problem, because I'd read these books and I'd be like, oh, that girl sounds just like me. This story sounds just like me. And all of these books end with the happy ending of her going into treatment and getting better. And I usually didn't like reading the ends because I was like, well, I'm not ready to give this up.
What made you gravitate towards those books? Because you thought you might have a problem?
Yeah. Probably. I probably thought I might have a problem and wanted to understand it better. Wanted to understand why I was doing it, what it was all about, and just, the curiosity in me wanted to know more about what was going on. And so the more I didn't eat, the more then you get cravings, or you get put in situations where you do have to eat, social events with friends, or especially with my family. My family was a big one. So then that's when I started throwing up, because my mom needed to see that I was eating food, but I didn't want to keep that food in my body, so I'd get rid of it. So I did that for a very long time. Probably, well, to be quite honest, probably until age 26, 27. But it always comes in waves. So sometimes it's very debilitating, and it not ruins my life, but disrupts my life in a big way, because you get to a point where you can't function, and that's the only thing you can think about or be surrounded by. Or, I got to a point at school. I was lucky enough to make really good grades, And my teachers gave me more leeway than they probably would give most people. So there was a semester where I just stopped going to class. Like certain classes I knew I didn't need to go to except for certain days. And instead of going to class, what did I do? I would go to the grocery store, buy a bunch of food, go home and eat it, and throw it all up, and then like go work out. And that would be my day. And you can easily get swept up in that cycle, that habit, and just days go by and you're just doing it over and over and over and over and over again.
How did you finally get control of that?
I think so. It would happen in small bursts. So there was probably the time around like 18 where I got control of it enough to get my life back in order and feel more stable. But it's always that thing that I go back to when I get stressed. And as I've gotten older and understood that, I now have new ways to deal with stress and new ways to deal with that moment of my life that feels so chaotic that I can't control anything. Everything is falling apart underneath me and I have no footing. Those are the moments that I would go to bulimia, to be my comfort and to be my source of security. Now, as a 30-year-old adult, I have other ways to do that. And that is me now using fitness appropriately. So I train very intensely because that's sort of my medicine. Me using what once was kind of breaking me down to now build me up. There's other things I do too, self-development as far as like reading certain things or putting my energy into the things that are going to move me forward and get me out of whatever funk that I'm in. And then being surrounded by good people, my mom being one of them, to help me not go to those deep, dark places. And the more I realize the pattern, the more I realize my triggers, the more I know now to get help and to seek help before it gets too bad.
So you have to be mindful of what's going on.
Very mindful. Yes, very mindful. Keep
track of that, what that machine is making so that you can get, hey, wait, what are you doing to me right now?
Yes.
What's going on?
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. So many of us don't do that. Well, many of us don't even realize that that's going on. We're so identified with our thoughts that that's you in your mind. And I thought that way for years. What was the low point for you? When was the lowest point? And how were you able to get through that?
There was 2 low points that I can think of more recently. The first one was I was probably 21. And I was living in LA and I was going to school there. That was my little fashion stunt that I did. And I was stressed out because of schoolwork, stressed out because of just life. And I was very, very deep in my disease at that moment. I was very, very sick. There's no other way to say it. I remember it was Mother's Day and I came home to surprise my mom for Mother's Day. And I walked into the restaurant and she to this day says, I didn't even recognize you. That's how sick I was. I was just very gaunt. Just not there. Just literally going through the motions of life, but not being present at all. And so that summer, I took that semester off. I moved home and made an effort to get better. I'm very much a perfectionist and didn't want to get behind in school. So I didn't spend enough time home as I probably should have and moved back to LA the following semester. But that was a very low point for me. And it was low because I didn't even see where I was. I could only see it in the reflection of her reaction. The second low point, again, ironically, was in LA. I moved right after I graduated from ASU in 2013, beginning of 2013. I moved to continue working for American Apparel. I was working for their marketing department. And I was just overwhelmed with life and that transition that you make after you graduate. I had a bad relationship that was ending. And so I took to food, but it was in a new way. It was in an overeating way. So I wasn't getting rid of it like I normally would, but I was still consuming it. So I blew up like a balloon. And I knew that something needed to change, but I didn't know what. And I thought it was I needed to go back to this guy. That was not the answer. And
it never is.
No, it never is. But I moved back to Phoenix anyway because I figured I would try to make it work. And maybe I didn't give this relationship enough effort or attention. So I moved back to Phoenix. I decided to end my, I guess you could call it dream or passion with being involved in the fashion industry and take a quote unquote traditional job that I could do from Phoenix so that I could start to stabilize myself enough to have a family and go down that route of marriage and kids and, you know, be marketable as a proper woman. In my mind, that's
wow. That's interesting. I don't know. Okay,
but it's the things that I think in my head are very crazy. But that's how I saw it. It was, if I'm gonna live in Phoenix, I need to do something that's more acceptable, and being a developer seemed more acceptable. It was more of a corporate job. It was something that I could do here to make good money, and in my mind, I was probably still trying to win back that guy, and I thought that that would be something that he would appreciate more than if I was trying to do the creative efforts that I really do enjoy.
Do you understand the root of your suffering now during that time? Do you understand what caused it? What was the...
I think a lot of my suffering is because I tried to be a people pleaser. Even in just what I just said about the reason why I was doing these things was to hopefully win him back. A lot of the moments where I feel out of control in my life are because I'm doing things to please other people. And it's maybe not a particular person as it was with him, but maybe it's just the societal ideals that people have set in front of us and in front of me. I think I'm very good at the academic lifestyle. I can follow the rules. I can go to school. I can get good grades. I can get a good job. I can work that system very well, but that's probably not the system I want to be a part of. And so I think, yeah, the root of a lot of my problems are when I do things that are to please other people and not myself.
Well, you shared with me your some of your personal journal, which was very brave of you. And you titled it Surrender to Life. Now, that was your title.
Yep.
Explain to me surrender. Surrender for me in life is so critical because at least hopefully at some point you realize that you basically have control of nothing. And you have to surrender or you suffer the consequences. Explain to me why you called your journal Surrender to Life and what does that mean to you?
In 2015, I think, the winter, I went on a trip to San Francisco. It's sort of my tradition to take a personal trip by myself each year to a place that I've always wanted to explore. And San Francisco was the option that year. And I just remember having that overwhelming feeling of nothing was going right in my life. I was treading water. Everything that I was trying wasn't working out. I kept maybe trying to live up to certain expectations and wasn't able to. And I remember having a phone conversation with a friend while I was there, and he kind of talked me off of a ledge, so to speak. I don't even remember the contents of our conversation, but I remember the next day I had breakfast by myself, but I sat next to this man, and he had a book on the table, and I don't remember the title, but it was about energies and light energies. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I really want to talk to him. He seems interesting. And so we did start talking. He asked me something and we just started talking from there. And we both were talking about how we've gotten to a point in life where things are coming to us in a way that's scary. He was experiencing success in his life and living in a house that he didn't feel that he should be living in. And his mom kept trying to just tell him, like, it's okay. Like, you've earned this and you can afford it. It's okay. And in a lot of ways, I felt the same way. You know, you get to a point where you can now do things that you couldn't do before, and you maybe feel guilty about it, or you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be living this way, or I always needed it to feel in control of things and wanted to sort of script my life. If you are not in control, you do not control all the variables. There's going to be lots of things in life that you don't have any say over. The wind is going to blow and you don't get to say what direction it blows in. And in that trip, I realized that I needed to surrender to life. I needed to flow with the tide instead of against it. And I kept trying to go against it. And so that's where Surrender to Life came from.
How do you learn to surrender? What do you do?
It's a work in progress for sure. For me, it's just remembering to let go and trying to make that my first thing that I go to in certain situations. You know, if it's a situation that I wish had gone better or want to change how it went, I have to remember that I don't get to control the outcome. I get to put in inputs, but I don't get to control the outcome. If I'm having a conflict with a friend, I don't get to decide if he forgives me or not. I get to say how I feel about it. I get to share my love for him, but he's in control of whether he forgives me or not. So that's sort of how I approach it in trying to surrender my control.
You know, it's one thing to say that we're going to, but really most of our life is driven by our habits. What kind of habits have you instilled in your life to learn to let go, to practice letting go?
That's a good question.
Or have you?
I don't think I have. If I try to think of a habit that's specifically related to that goal, I don't think I have.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a goal. Just be a way of living.
I think I haven't made it a habit that I wrote out or are intentional about, but I have softened the amount of control I impose on certain situations. For example, if I'm asked to do something that I normally would not care to do, I maybe think about it in a better light. I change my perspective about it and change, decide, is this something that could benefit you or bring you value? Instead of just saying no right away, I maybe think about it a little bit more and consider it a little bit more. Or take more opportunities to stretch myself out into situations where I won't be the one who's in control. If I'm going out to dinner with friends, for example, I generally want to be the person who picks the time, picks the place. In those situations, I might say, hey, where do you guys want to go? What time works for you guys? So that's very small, but I think those have been the small strides that I've made to surrender.
I think that's good. Now, you decided to become a personal trainer. What drove you to that?
Oh, yes. That was because I was seeing so many women, especially at my work, struggle. In the cafe, all you hear is people wanting to lose weight, not knowing what they should eat. Should I eat this? Or I did that? Or I'm trying this fad diet? Or I'm trying this new workout? And you just hear this chatter over and over and over. And I can relate 100% because I've been on that journey for so long. And I know what it's like to not feel comfortable with how you look or how you feel. And I also know how great you can feel when you are eating right and when you are exercising. And for me, you asked me earlier about getting out of those slumps. The second slump that I took when I was, binge eating in LA and then finally moved back here to Phoenix, I got out of that slump because I started taking care of myself correctly. I was eating better. I was working out consistently. And that was what cleared the funk for me to be able to start dealing with all my problems.
What steps did you take to do that? Because that isn't just something you say, all right, today everything changes. You have to take steps. What were the steps?
Well, so I am sort of black and white in that way, where there were steps to increase it and make it more progressive. But if I make a decision to start eating healthy, I have to throw away the potato chips that are in my cabinet or, not take that second bite of the donut that's in my hand. I have to literally take action in that moment when I'm in that spirit and not look back. And I have to attach it to something that means something to me. So for me, I wanted to be that person who you could invite to a 5K on Wednesday and I could run it on Saturday. And I knew that I wanted to be amongst a group of friends who traveled to do races. I wanted to live a fit lifestyle. I also wanted to be able to market myself. A lot of it had a lot to do with marketing. Because I know if you walk in for a job interview and you look a specific way, that speaks to your habits. And I didn't want my presentation to speak that I didn't have good habits of taking care of myself. So that's why I those were the kind of talking points in my head that I went back to when it was an early morning workout, or I was eating a meal that I didn't want to eat while watching someone else eat pizza. I knew the deep-seated reason why that was so important to me and what I was going to gain by following through on those commitments. So yeah, for me, it is very much, I have to decide and do it right now. If I say Monday, I'm not, I'll do it on Monday kind of person. Because between now and Monday, I'll eat a lot. And Mondays, well, like my starting weight's going to be a lot higher. And then I'm also going to have a lot of reasons between now and Monday that I might not want to right now. Because, now it's looking more like next Monday. Or, why don't I just wait till next month when life, quote unquote, settles down? Life doesn't settle down.
How would you work with someone if I was a client of yours and I wasn't black and white, which I'm not? How do you work with me?
I try to meet people where they are. I try to understand, one, why it's important to them. What is the reason why you want to lose weight? I want to understand how important this is for them. There's kind of that scale of change. How ready for change is that person? So I'm working with a lady right now, and she told me, she showed me this picture of a wedding dress, and she's like, I just want to look really good in that wedding dress. And to be able to wear that wedding dress, I can't have the body I have right now. She's not even engaged though. So that's not, I say that to say that that's not a real, that's
interesting.
That's not a hard set goal. There's no real motivators around that, because you're setting yourself up for something that doesn't even really exist yet. So you don't even have an engagement yet, let alone a wedding date yet. So that dress is so far in the future that's not going to drive your current actions today. So for her, for me, it makes it harder for me. So I have to kind of get to the root of why she hasn't been successful in the past and start there. For her, she's got a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of pressure that was put on her from a childhood. So we're starting very small. It's just me seeing the steps that I put in front of her, how able is she to adapt to them, and then address it from there. So, right now she's doing amazing and she's doing really good, but there might be a point where she starts to slip. And so I have to sit with her and remind her and say, why is this important to you? The other reason was she just wants to be happy. Like, she wants to be very content and happy. So these are the only two things that I have for motivators for her. And we haven't needed to dig any deeper.
That makes me think of two questions.
Sure.
What's with the wedding dress? And then how do you get her to realize that external is important, but you're not going to find happiness in external? How do you translate that?
I honestly have not tried to help people see that yet, because people, in my experience, see that on their own. I try to help keep them engaged long enough to where they get to that point and they see it. There's another lady that I'm helping, and, when I asked her goals, it was, I want to wear a thong bikini. I'm going to, I think it was, some island, I can't remember. And she's like, I want to wear a thong bikini on that trip. I hear her say that, but I know that there's something deeper. I know that there's more to the story. So we've been working together now for 5 months, and probably the first month she wasn't really present. She, hey, where you at? Checking in on her a lot more frequently. But I knew if I could keep her engaged that she would be successful, because she's very disciplined. She's very much like me. Like, she can attach onto a goal and achieve that goal. So my job was just keeping her engaged, checking in on her, letting her know that I wasn't going to quit on her so that she didn't quit on herself. Eventually, she hit a moment where she told me, hey, I thought this was about a bikini, but this is about so much more. I work out now in front of a mirror in a sports bra because I love the way that I look, and I love treating my body well. And I wake up now because it means a lot to me. And I don't have drinks when I'm out socializing with my friends because, hey, I'm really funny without drinking anyways. And so she started to see the value in it herself. I didn't have to tell her that. I'm stubborn in that way. If someone tells me something, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take stock in it. I'm just not. I have to figure it out myself. And I think that's how I approach things with people too. I want them to see the light and come to the light themselves, but I want to provide that environment and the tools to help get them there.
So you're a little bit like that metal detector you used when you were a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
Help you. I'm not going to tell you. You're going to find it on your own, but I'm going to be there to guide you.
Yeah.
I think that's an effective way of training people. But you know what? Here's what I've found with meditation, and I know a number of people that own yoga studios and fitness things. People start out all gung-ho, and then a couple weeks later, they're back to their old habits. What do you do as a personal trainer to get people to reshape their habits?
Lately, what I've been doing with the start of my challenges is I have them go through an activity. And I got this activity from a book called 6 Months to Six Figures by a guy named Peter Voog. And he has you really write out your vision of what you see yourself being at the end of the 30 days. So my challenges are usually 30 days, so we use that. So you have to get really clear about where you're going. So if I see somebody falling off, I bring them back to that. You know, I use their words. You wrote down that this was what you wanted and this is how you saw yourself. And I bring the emotion into it to try to connect with them. You know, you saw yourself feeling so great and just feeling relieved that you finally succeeded through a program and made it to the end. How is what you're doing right now helping you get there right now? So kind of trying to show people how what you're doing isn't getting you more of what you want. And this is what you said you wanted.
Have you read the book, The Power of Habit?
I have not. And you know what's really funny is that book has been on my wish list for so long.
90%, was it Aristotle said, 95% of everything you do is habit. It's so true. And it begins with mental habits. What you think you become. I mean, there's no way around it. I want to get back to something about service is a big part of your life, to be of service. So if I came up to you on the street and I said, Crystal, what does it mean to you to be of service? And how does surrender fit into that?
I think for me, I've had to find a really good balance between not surrendering myself completely and being that people pleaser and giving up so much of me that I'm giving everything I have to you to help you. And then I'm the one who's suffering at the end because I have nothing left for me. So for me to be a servant is to share my gifts. Whatever my gifts are, if somebody needs those gifts, I want to be there to give them to them and to selflessly give without expecting anything in return.
That's hard to do. How do you do it? Or how do you try? It's always a trying. Well, Yoda said there's no try, there's only do. How do you do it?
To do what? Give my gifts or to keep the balance? To
keep the balance, to provide but not seek reward, which is in the Bhagavad Gita. You're entitled to the fruits, to the labor, but not the fruits of your labor. How do you do that?
I think for me, it's hard because for a lot of what I do, I don't want something in return that is comparable to what I gave, but I want your success in exchange. So these people that I help on, with their training and their weight loss, what I'm getting from that is them being successful and them being happy or being fulfilled by what I've provided. So in a weird way, I do want something in return, but it's not necessarily required.
What do you want in return?
What I want in return is their success. I don't know how to rephrase that. I don't feel like I'm phrasing that properly. So if I were to help you, Rich, what would be rewarding to me would be for you to have success and for you to use the information that I've given you to be successful with. Like you said, somebody always wants something. We don't give without expecting something in return. That would be what I would expect in return.
How do you do that and incorporate surrender into that?
That comes with the letting go and just knowing that I have to give you my gift without expecting anything in return. And so there's been people who I do selflessly send information and get them started and help them for free. And I have to know that that may never come back to me in the form of them being successful on that plan that I gave them.
No, these are hard questions. I don't have answers for.
So I went to this seminar. It's a 3-part seminar. But in the first part of it, they say, we don't have your answers. We just have lots of good questions.
Maybe that's the key to life. People are always looking for meaning in life. Just keep asking questions. Yeah. I guess that's the meaning until you can't anymore. For me personally, I'm trying to learn to let go of attachment to not only the negative, but to the good, to just kind of float. Mm-hmm. Like they talk about in the Tao Te Ching, to be living in the Tao. But that's, again, much, much easier said than done, obviously. Or we all wouldn't be on these hero's journeys that we all seem to be on. When you look now, what does Crystal need to work on now?
Productivity.
That's a surprising answer to me, because knowing you a little bit as I do, you seem to be a very productive person. What do you mean by that?
For me, I think I always tell people I'm a recovering type A personality. Because I'm not as hard on myself as I used to be, and I'm not as, I gotta be here on time. I gotta have this in right. This paper didn't come out right. I'm going to reprint it again. My handwriting's a little off. I'm going to rewrite this whole thing again so it's right. I was very much, I guess you could call it OCD, but I was very much that way. I always had high expectations for myself. I always wanted to do more than what was expected of me by others, but also of myself, which is hard to constantly live up to that expectation, because you come up with all the problems that I've had to deal with, like depression and, the eating and all of this, because you just have unrealistic expectations. To hear you say that's surprising that you don't think of yourself as being productive. Maybe I am productive to certain people's level, but like for my personal level, I feel like I could be more productive. But then again, can I be? Am I being realistic with myself? I don't know.
What would you say to your 15-year-old self today about your eating disorder?
I would try to figure out a way that I could tell her that it's really ridiculous and there are better ways to get what you're looking for. You're hurting, but this is only going to make you hurt more. And this isn't the answer to your question.
What was the question?
I don't think she knew. I don't think I know. I think that there was just a lot of pain there. And she had no idea how to deal with any of it. Or, places to go, resources, anything. And it's hard looking back now, because we're a whole family grieving. And my mom is grieving equally. So she doesn't know what I need unless I speak up. But she also may not even know how to get me what I need, even if I did speak up. Maybe I'm just not privy to them. But I think our whole family could have benefited from some help at that time.
Perhaps, instead of always seeking a solution, we just have to go through that pain. You have to go through the darkness to get to the light.
Oh, of course. But a lot of people are just like, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for your loss. I really don't care for when people say that. There's maybe an expectation that, oh, I'm so sorry, but it'll be okay. And so when you hear that and you're like, oh, it'll be okay. Like, I'm gonna get over this at some point. I don't think that's necessarily the case or should be the case. I lost my dad, a huge part of me. That's not gonna ever be okay. You can heal and you can grow from it, but it's not going to be okay. It's not like, oh, that was totally fair. Like, I get that. Like, of course, there's never that moment. And so when I have people who are experiencing loss, I almost want to tell them, hey, people are probably going to tell you that it's going to be okay, and it's not. It's going to be 17 years later. You're still going to cry. It's still going to hurt. And I definitely agree that going through the pain is helpful. But when you're young or misguided, you don't even have to be young per se. You could just be misguided and you don't know how to deal with or channel that pain. And you look for other things to feel it or to soothe it or to numb it. That's where we
we have a problem. Some people could go to alcohol to numb their pain. They're not dealing with it. They're hardly even going through it because they're not feeling it. They're not really allowing themselves to feel it. And that's kind of what I liken my eating disorder to be. You know, it was a way to numb myself and something else to focus on versus the actual pain that I was feeling. But that was my tool, and that's what I used. And that tool is still in my toolkit. I have better tools now, so it's not the first tool I use, but I know that it's in that red box I carry in my toolbox, it's still there. And so if a child, you know, a 15-year-old Crystal isn't given a better tool, she has to find a tool on her own to use. And that could come in many forms. And I think in society, we've seen that in many forms. And in youth, you know, becoming disobedient or reckless or abusing drugs or, you know, abusing sex or whatever it is, we see that. And I think it's a lot of the times they just don't have the right tools or the knowledge.
Here's a little bit left base. Have you forgiven your father for leaving you when you were 13?
You know, in the seminar I mentioned, there's a process where you have to write a letter to your mom and to your dad. You're writing it to almost their younger selves, so them as a child. Actually, I think you're writing it to them now. I don't remember, but in that process, I did. I think the harder part has been forgiving my mom.
Why?
I don't think she was there for me how I needed her to be.
Have you ever talked to her about it?
I've talked to her in small parts about it. I think I've barely just discovered this. Parts of it I've brought up to her, and I will continue to bring other parts about it up as it's fitting.
So it's a journey that's only just begun.
Yes.
Your personal training, and can you, if somebody was seeking you out as a personal trainer, how would they get in contact with you?
Sure. Yes, I do personal training, and it's mostly because of all of the pain I've just described to you. And I
lived it.
I know how people are hurting, and I can relate to that, and I can relate to the silly things we do sometimes to get more of what we want in terms of eating or not eating or overeating, or just that lack of guidance and not having the tools and the resources to reach your goals. And so, yes, I do training for nutrition and for fitness. My website is bodyofgratitude.com. And I have plans that you can subscribe to for specifically just for nutrition or for fitness and nutrition together. And then I also do web development for fitness professionals. So any fitness professional who wants to do business online, I build websites under my domain is bodybuilderwebsites.com.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you again for listening. And please leave any comments or suggestions. We're always looking for ways to improve our show and make it the best show it can possibly be. Visit mindfulaccord.com, where you can find additional episodes and you can follow our blog. We give some helpful information on mindfulness, meditation, and just ways to manage our everyday stressful lives. And most importantly, if you know of a friend or a family member that would benefit from this story, please share it with them. Until next time, I'm Rich Decker.